Where have we landed in 2020? Well, we're here in the midst of a pandemic with the wrong kind of federal leadership. And now, because of the pressure cooker that is our lives, it's turned up high. And people in authority who get satisfaction from abusing power all over our social media and televisions are being caught in the act, and they don't care. While we're reacting and enacting from frustration and emotional broiler that is currently what we're living in. But you knew that. And our beloved Charles Barber has found a well-written article from the New Yorker magazine that tells us about a rich African-American gay man coming to terms with his past and the current state of being and our national wrestling with racism, while helicopters are hovering over his Upper East Side apartment in New York City during a riot. During a protest or a march. We're not sure it's a riot. We just know that helicopters are hovering around his window in his Upper East Village or Upper East Side Manhattan apartment. And I know how he felt in the panic. I have no idea how it felt to sign a lease or a mortgage on his apartment or to write based on just going to theater. That's his regular job. He's a theater critic in a world-class publication and other publications in the world's theater capital, New York, New York. And I have no idea what his daily life is like. I'd love to know. I just adore the penthouse view. You know the rest. But I can tell you as a Black gay man what terror feels like when you have to put aside Mr. Ailes and my privilege and come to terms with the reality of what it feels like to wonder, do I belong? As another Black man right now during this pandemic. Panic is not logical. Panic is based on fear and survival. It's the opposite of love and courage. I am deliberately not discussing this morning our poor or economically challenged young Black men killed by police. I'm talking about what systematic racism feels like to men who would fit comfortably in our pews of most UUs like I do. I know what it feels like to be in a foreign country outside the tourist area and to have what would be an argument, the kind of disagreement that happens in a restaurant between any couple. How you and your partner both differently cope with the demands of the day. I want to dine. And David wanted us to eat in a hurry so that we could be the first ones on the bus. No big deal, right? No big worry. But I got so upset at our argument, the fear crept in from some point while I was angry. I was a lone Black gay man on that bus, on that tour. And usually that's not a problem for us to disagree about something in a restaurant. I mean, we've been together a long time. But I'm not in Decatur where somebody, if I take a notion, to walk home will recognize me and ask me, Duncan, what are you doing walking home? And inquire about why I'm walking home. I'm not in Decatur, so if I stomp out of the restaurant, and I'm not proposing that I was going to do that, but I could do that and get on a bus and maybe even beat David home. I'm Black, gay, and in France. And I'm in some old outskirts outside of Paris, the Loire Valley, not even in Paris. And I don't know anybody. I'm gay and I don't speak French well enough to get back to our hotel. And most importantly, I have no idea how the French countryside feels about Black Americans, Black gays, or any combination of those choices or separately. And the fear is not logical, y'all. It doesn't have to be, but it feels real to me. And then the worst happens. The worst message that comes when you feel like this. There are no Teagues within 1,000 miles that I know of. And then David looks differently, and all our years together are smashed into my dependence on his willingness to stay with me right then. And I'm afraid now, and I'm panicked, and I don't belong here. Why did I let myself go to Paris? And on and on. And this is the part where both the writer and I share. I don't belong here. No love can save us, no sense of courage. Now, some of you are trying desperately to find yourself in this story or to find a time in your own story when you had this kind of terror. And I'm going to ask you to wait and just stay with us in this moment, unless you're African American. This is our time to stay in our story, me and Mr. Ailes, and just stay in our craziness for just a little moment later. We, Mr. Ailes and I, and possibly at any point in time, are part of 2 or 3 categories that might be despised for no reason other than the fact that we're present. David and I had an encounter similar to this in Amsterdam. One of a party of Texans who were in our hotel lobby after we came back from lunch had to let David and I know loud enough how he felt about men like us. As if I flew all the way to Holland to hear his problem. His problem that David and I didn't belong anywhere near him. Really. Even if I graduated as an independent student from a top-rated Catholic college in the Midwest, and then I graduated with a graduate degree from one of the best Methodist schools in the country, Candler School of Theology at Emory University here in Atlanta. I am revered for who I am and what I have done in Atlanta and some other places. But if people like this Texan don't know and don't care, and really don't care, it makes no difference. I am in that moment not a kid in trouble running from the cop, but it doesn't matter. I don't belong there. David and I don't belong there in his mind. Even with a passport and paid tickets and hotel reservations, as valid as his. His privilege says that he gets to determine who belongs where. The police in Cambridge also arrested Dr. Henry Louis Gates at his home because, like many of us, he walked out and left his keys and locked the door. Yes, Henry Louis Gates from Finding Our Roots, a small African-American Harvard professor, Harvard professor, kind of mature to be a burglar. But the police could not fathom that it wasn't his home he was breaking into. And really, there's a photograph of him in handcuffs on his own front porch. You want to tell me there wasn't some kind of proof that that was his home? Like a driver's license? And who among the neighbors called the police on him that didn't know him? Or did they really know him and not care? Was it that he didn't belong there, so it didn't matter who he was? Mr. Ailes gives an example after example after example at the end of the article of incidents like this where he feels he must forgive racist acts according to the way his mom brought him up. Statements by people in power. And if he chooses to call them out on their racism, then he's choosing to put their powerful relationship in jeopardy. How they might influence his career as a theater critic in New York City. And this is why I'm asking you to stay in this black story with a little gay fringe. Have folks asked you to deny their racism, their oppressing other people, and the diminishment of your personhood? I can hear many different groups of you saying, yes, they did. I hear women in the room saying, amen, Duncan, they did. I hear disabled people in the room saying, yes, Duncan, they did. And they even made it so much that I don't belong there. They made sure I couldn't even get in the building. Yes, they did. And here's a question. Where do you belong? What kind of place do you want to create for people who are not like you so they feel like they belong? Abundant love, this is our question this morning, just as much as Tennessee Valley. And Tennessee Valley, don't worry about me. I have stake in Tennessee Valley. Y'all already made me a part of the community. I'm fine. I got folks up there who love me, and I love y'all. We're cool. You've proven to me that I'm welcomed in the hills of East Tennessee when I didn't know nothing about it. And I didn't get it confused. I knew I wasn't in Nashville, and I sure wasn't in Memphis. I was in East Tennessee. And I thank you for that. But see, this is not about individual welcomes. This is about systems. Because it is the systems that embed fear in us so much that even if I'm in the place I have longed to go to for the whole entirety of my life, with the man I love the most, there's this tiny embedded message when you get too upset or when you get scared. Who told you that you could be this far from where you belong? Ain't nobody over here like you. Now you have done it. For your further investigation into this topic, I asked you to look at a book called Whistling Vivaldi, and also to explore the work of Dr. Pauline Rose Clance. She actually helped found the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta with her husband and her partner. And she's the author of the work around the imposter syndrome. Now I got folks with me. I can feel it. That especially for people who are on the margins, when we're the first to arrive in a place that we have deserved, that we're even honored to be in, we don't feel like we belong there because culturally it's not the same. And then there are those who are already established in that place, who make it part of their business to let you know that though you somehow got here, you don't really belong here. And it makes us feel like we're an imposter in our own bodies, in our own achievements. And it can even affect your grades. It can affect your ability to do what you want, to accomplish what you want. I grew up singing. I did a jury in front of an all-white juror for a music department. I had never sung for a jury. I had never competed with my voice before. I'd only sung in church, and you couldn't hear my baritone voice. And I promise you, there had never been a time in church when you couldn't hear me sing, even if you didn't want to. So the imposter syndrome is part of this, but it's not all of it. I just bring that up so you have somewhere else to go to dig deeper into this. But I'm not really concerned about your intellectual knowledge of this topic this morning. I'm concerned about your heart and our collective heart and what decision we make about what messages we give about where you belong and where do I belong. And where do people who don't look like us belong when they come to be a part of our loving, courageous communities? I'm talking about when we are troubled by the identity of someone that we haven't learned how to let into our circles. And if we did, we must remind them of their rightful place. Well, Duncan, I'm talking about racism and the oppression that triggers a prize-winning author, a wealthy, mature man in his Upper East Side apartment to shrink into panic and fear that he doesn't belong in his own home, thrown back in time in his childhood to all that had happened. I'm asking this morning that we determine this morning that our love is so profound that we're not just the white guy he called over to the apartment to help him. We're already there. I'm talking about that we directly approach systematically all the stuff that put that fear in Mr. Ailes in the first place. All that stuff that I somehow internalized and said, you don't really belong in the Loire Valley. And if David leaves you, you are stuck. That's the systematic stuff I'm trying to address this morning. We have a moment in history right now, a gift of time and space to finally talk about this mastodon of racism that's been sitting in the living room. Can you tell me how we can get where I belong this morning? Is it where we are surrounded by courageous beloveds? Not folks who have to be imposters so they fit in. So may our love be so profound that nobody feels that. Nobody. May our love be so this morning. Amen. Charles, thank you so much for bringing this reading to us.